Can your shell do this? How about this one? There are three options. Either it can't, or you have a plugin for that. Oh, but there's a third option. You're running Nushell. Yeah, Nushell. But wait, how did I even get here? I just released a video comparing Bash to ZSH and then to Fish and talking about how Fish wins it all by being solid enough yet modern and with built-in UX that makes everything better. Then I sat back, opened my laptop to review some comments and whoa, I'm gonna have to use a bigger screen for that. What's going on here? Well, I guess we're checking Nushell. So Nushell isn't your typical shell because it's new. But seriously, like any performant modern terminal application, Nushell is written in Rust, and it's not only the speed and efficiency. You'll actually visually see and understand in a few seconds why this little fact is so important. It has 32,000 stars on GitHub, making it pretty well known and also supported by other major tools like my beloved Starship prompt, for example. But we're not here for a popularity contest. Nushell actually comes with its own language and a philosophy behind it. Here's how they put it. Rather than thinking of files and data as raw streams of text, Nu looks at each input as something with structure. For example, when you list the contents of a directory, what you get back is a table of rows, where each row represents an item in that directory. But this is just where things start. Nu loves pipes and queries. It comes with a set of operators that are straightforward and easy to use. There's a long list of available plugins and scripts, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's install it and get our hands dirty. You can get Nu in many ways. Being the hipster I am, I'll get it with my Nix Flake. Once installed, I can run Nu, and the first thing it's going to say is this is the path I'm looking for config files and whether I want to use the defaults. And I do want to use the defaults. It'll work perfectly without them as well, but I definitely don't want an arbitrary configuration path. Nushell adheres to the XDG configuration parameters, so setting XDG config home to my local.config dir sets this path in its radar. Nushell comes with two config files, env.nu that's loaded first with the environment variables before its sibling config.nu, which is the main configuration file. The shell welcomes us with a message that can be suppressed later, with the docs, Discord server, and even how long it's been since the first commit. Out of the gate, it seems slightly different than what we're used to, but there is so much power lying underneath this prompt. I have L alias to ESA on ZSH, which naturally isn't configured here, but I did want to run it just to show you the first thing you may notice. Remember how I mentioned that the fact it's written in Rust is beyond just performance? If you've ever written one line of Rust, you'd know how powerful its compiler is and how useful are its messages. Well, Nu suggests we've made a mistake, and maybe we're looking for another command. You get an error type, a description, and even a small breadcrumb for debugging. If I'd run ESA directly, I get the usual colored list, but let's just run the ls as is, and here's where the magic starts. ls returns a table of data, not a list of files, but rather addresses the output string of bytes as data input to populate the table. It's numbered, it's sorted, it has columns of types and different information that's easy to read and query. But it isn't just ls. Let's try watching running processes with ps. Same deal, a table of PIDs, status, etc. It had even changed the title location to the bottom, knowing it'll be difficult to see with a long table. How thoughtful is that? To see what nuenv sees as a table, you can run the $env command, which is also received as a table. Let's go deeper. Remember ls gives us a table? Well, we can actually query it using Nu. Let's pipe the data to the operator sort by and pick the modified column. Nice. Want it the other way? Add the ---- reverse flag and it's flipped. I love how it just makes sense and super obvious to use. This is actually real UX. But the query language goes further than that. Let's go back to our process list and pipe it to the where operator and pick processes using above 5% CPU levels. Beautiful. What about history search for Ctrl+R? Most of you either run fzf or have it configured. I'm using a twin with ZSH and I've got videos covering both in the channel. But check out Nu's default, a fuzzy search with your command history as input ready to be filtered. Nu really does attempt to read everything as data. It even assumes types of anything you give it. The operator describe, for example, would take my echoed word test and tell me that it's a string, which is useful when scripting and trying to understand what you're reading. Imagine having something like that in Bash. This would save junior me hours of messing about with scripts reading AWS resources. So I'll try to pop up NeoVim, which Nu naturally doesn't know as V because it's not yet aliased, and like earlier, it tries to guess what I was actually looking for. Let's create a text file which I can then use ls to query using the where operator. It's not dramatically different than just using find or fd if you're a modern shell user, it's just the approach is different. So yeah, lists of files are nice, but not enough to get you to switch, would it? I don't know if you already see massive appeal here. For me, someone who works heavily with YAMLs, JSON structures, and too much Kubernetes configuration objects, having such a powerful querying language ingrained into my shell is not only the abused term of game changer, but a huge upgrade to how I work and a real friction remover. Let's get a pods object as JSON and see what Nu can do. I'll use the save operator to save the data into a file, which makes more sense than the POSIX option, doesn't it? So there's my file, and now using open, look what we have there. Structured data in a table. Let's get the kind of object which returns the string pod. We can get the status and go a level deeper by fetching status.phase. Same deal, the string is returned. If you've ever written a bash script in your life or an awk line, you should have tears of joy in your eyes right now. Either that, or I'd get my favorite comment on the internet, you have a skill issue. Let's get another JSON, the package.json from the official npm repo on GitHub. We can curl it, but check this out. Nu has HTTP, followed by get. Literally HTTP gets the file that you can pipe to a query. What? You can now get the version or any other filter you like without having to save it or run any intermediary. Nu does it all on its own. It doesn't stop at JSONs. Nu supports a long list of data types: CSVs, EMLs, INI files, TOMLs, XML, YAML, SQLite. Wait, SQLite? Let's see this one in action because I couldn't believe either. I'll head over to my Telegram workout spot, which holds a copy of my production SQLite database. Yes, I run SQLite in production and I'm proud of myself. So here's the object. Let's naively run the open command. And what do you know? There are my tables. By the way, it may not seem this way, but my app security in production is top priority for me, especially when it comes to authentication. With that in mind, I'm pausing here for a few seconds to share some big news in the world of app security and authentication. Auth0, the sponsor of this video, has just rolled out an amazing update to their free tier, and it's a game changer for startups and indie devs. Let's dive into how this can supercharge your app development. First up, Auth0 is now offering a whopping 25,000 monthly active users on their free plan. That's right, you can now scale your app to 25,000 users without spending a dime on authentication. But wait, there's more. You're getting unlimited Okta and social connections. This means that your users can now log in however they prefer, making your app more accessible than ever. And here's the cherry on top. Custom domains are now included. Brand your authentication process to match your app's look and feel, creating seamless user experience. Now let's talk security. Auth0 isn't just giving you more, they're also beefing up protection. Their free tier now includes built-in defenses, including brute force protection and suspicious IP throttling. This is cutting-edge security that's usually reserved for enterprise-level solutions, and now it's available to all devs of all sizes. Whether you're building your first app or scaling your 10th, Auth0's new free tier has got you covered. Head over to Auth0 website, check out the details. Remember, no credit card is required to get started. The only time you'll need one is for custom domain verification, and you won't be charged. Start building more secure, scalable applications today with Auth0 expanded free tier. Now back to Nushell. Let's get something, starting with just workouts. Cool. What if I want the first user in the system? Same deal, just piping it to where operator. So open the DB, get users where ID is 1. What if I want just the name or an SQL syntax running against it? No problem, pipe it to query.db and provide the SQL query with selecting the username only from the same table with the same conditions, and there I am. So Nu can do a lot, I'm sold, but without the tooling I'm used to, it wouldn't be worth the hassle. I need my prompt configured, I need Zoxai to move around, I'll never work without autocompletions for AWS or kubectl. This would be so painful. Prompt-wise, things are easy. Starship supports almost every kind of shell you can think of. Nushell is right there on the list, and all it takes is a couple of easy additions to env.nu and config.nu and we're set. I'll source both. The colors changed, but let's head over to a Git repo like my .files, and what do you know, my beloved prompt is here. If I create a Python file, Starship sees it. Golang, no problem. I got my gopher. Good to go. The same applies for Zoxai. It supports Nushell. 2 quick additions to both config files, source them, and there we are, starting to feel at home. So this is easy, but what about completions? AWS doesn't officially support Nushell, neither does kubectl. These two are just examples of what I use. I'm assuming most large systems don't support it. This is a deal breaker for me. So I tried Claude out, and it spat a bunch of ideas and scripts, but none of them worked. I also found NuScripts, a nice repo with lots of useful scripts, alias lists and custom completions, but sadly, these are very custom. So I did get some cool add-ons like path completions, which I never knew I could use, but long story short, it's not it. And then I found a magic powder. And no, it's not what you think. Carapace is a multi-shell completion library and binary. It was made to support Cobra CLIs and populate their modules and options for every existing shell. And what do you know, almost every major CLI is written with Cobra, including, yes, AWS and kubectl. Quick installation with Nix, of course, a couple of configuration additions to load it into Nushell, and moment of truth. kubectl, tab, and voila. Every possible option with description and color, 10 times better than before. But wait, it can't probably get live objects, can it? kubectl, get, and no way. Fuzzy find pods, tab again, and yep, a list of pods not only selectable but also ready for filtration. I imagined having a solution, but I never factored in leveling up my existing setup so much. What about plain tooling like Git? Git sh tab, and sure enough, all the options Git has completed under your cursor. AWS is no exception. The entire CLI is available with fuzzy finding options, flags, and everything. The last piece of the puzzle, for those of you who are looking to keep Nushell like I do, is to actually configure it to be the default shell. To make new default, start by adding it to /etc/shells. Which new tells you the path, which will then be sent to sudo to the list of available system shells. Once you've made sure it's there, it's time to change it. chsh for change shells. You learn something new every day, and that's it. New is loaded. Let's make sure by firing up a new ghosty window to see new comes up by default. Now here's an annoying recursion. When new is first loaded with a new shell, it doesn't know about your configured XDG home config, so you'd have to set it on in the default path. In my case, a macOS path, but just grab the path that it shows when it starts and use that. I made sure XDG home is set in env.new, and then config.new that follows in the loading sequence will load the right config directly. Another thing you may want to do is make sure to have the editor variable set. In my case, and hopefully in yours too, that's nvim. Once set, I'll make sure it's loaded into the environment and then run config new, which pops the config file directly into nvim wherever you are. NeoVim users out there may also want to grab the tree-seater parser for new files, making everything nicer when reading and writing those pesky configuration files. Since it's a tree-seater parser, as part of the language support, you get dynamic syntax highlighting. There's a full-blown LSP as well that I've yet to explore, but if you're serious about new scripting, it should be on your list. Lastly, new comes with its own inline VI mode. By default, it's configured to use Emacs mode, but I changed it in my configuration and made sure that each time I hit escape, I go into VI normal mode, where I can traverse words, find characters, and make the usual changes with Vim motions. Also note the symbol next to the line changing from a colon when in the default insert mode, changing to a larger than arrow when going into normal mode, along with the cursor changing from box to underscore. New would create some brain injuries when you start. For example, my SKHD configuration stopped working, and while debugging it, I found new can't handle the same open command ZSH did. So I made it run with the run external embedded command that sends everything as arguments externally. One more annoyance was the escape characters, where in POSIX compliant shells you'd escape a space with a backslash, for example, whereas in new you'd wrap the entire line with backticks and let it be. All these changes are already pushed to my .dot files, so feel free to browse. These are all native behaviors. But what happens when you do want to extend Nushell? There's a repo within the Nushell GitHub org that's called Awesome New, where you're going to find super useful additions curated by the official developers, starting from a list of plugins, but there are also scripts, completions, editor support, etc. Here are a few I find specifically interesting to check. There's a Nushell QR maker, if that's your thing. I found an HCL support for you DevOps engineers out there working with Terraform or other HashiCorp tooling. There's even a regex parser in Nushell that you can install. Just scroll through the list in the following sections and you'll find lots of goodies. But how do you install these plugins, you may ask? Well, Nushell comes with nupum, the new package manager. It's rather easy to install, so let's follow the instructions. Once installed, we can run nupum. It's ready to go, so we clone a plugin and run nupum with it. It would kind of be nice if the package manager had done this for us, like TPM for Tmux, for example, and other package managers, but that's just nitpicking. So you're probably asking yourself whether I'm keeping Nushell. And if I'm honest, while making this video, I was adamant about going back to my ZSH and some fish efforts. But I must say, Nushell won me over. Not only it's amazing with data, supported by all the tools I like, it even makes many of them redundant. It's extremely fast. I found a way that supports my auto-completions and actually enhances them. I mean, what's not to like? So until further notice, I'm keeping it as my default shell, and let's see how things go. Having Nushell is great, but you also want a performant terminal. And while there are many choices out there, I think I found the one. Check this video next to hear all about it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.